Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. Thank you for being here. This is the Endless TBR. My name is Christian, and this is my channel where I talk about all things book related in my life. And this is my June recap / July TBR book video, recapping the months that I read in June of 2025 and talking about the books that I plan on reading in July of 2025. I'm currently re-recording this video because I had recorded it earlier. I bought one of those little clip-on microphones for my shirt, and I recorded the whole video using that, and then plugged it into my computer and realized that the sound quality was absolutely garbage, like even worse than it is now with my regular default camera. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try this again. I am not a tech guy by any means, and as I've said in my past videos, this is my first time doing anything like this before, so I have to, I guess, do some sound checks and figure out what I'm going to do, because the mic quality on those things was really, really bad. I think I was talking too loud, but I decided just to go back to the OG microphone for this one. Old reliable. At least I know that the sound quality is okay, you can at least hear what I'm saying. I don't sound like a 1920s baseball broadcaster, because that's the vibes I was getting from the other one. But yeah, so I'm going to go over the books that I've read. Not too much has changed from my last couple videos. There's going to be a bit of a repeat because I went over kind of my progress from 2 weeks ago. I did, in a way, meet my June TBR goal. I did, in a way, not meet my June TBR goal. That is because I read the number of books that I said I was going to read. However, I did end up switching out one of the books that I said I was going to read for another book that caught my interest, just kind of like a spur-of-the-moment thing. But I'll get into that in a moment. So, just a quick recap. The books that I read this month of June, in order of I read them, is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. That was the first book that I read. I read A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. And then my nostalgia read of the month was The City of Ember by Jean DeProw. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Not entirely sure. And I turned that into a full box set read. So I also read The People of Sparks. Then I took a little break from the City of Ember series and I read Tales of Light and Life from the Star Wars High Republic series. Then I went back to the City of Ember. I read the prequel, The Prophet of Yonwood. And then finished it off with The Diamond of Darkhold right there. And then this is where I took a little deviation. So the other book I had said in my June TBR video was this, The Well of Ascension, second Mistborn book by Brandon Sanderson, and I am reading it. As you can see, my bookmark there. I'm a little over halfway, probably like 2/3 of the way through the book. So I've been chipping away at that, like I said I would. But I also started reading and finished. Really bad glare on this one. This is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. So the reason I started reading this is I love to bring a book with me to work. I live in an area with a lot of unpredictable traffic, so I usually leave like an hour before my shift starts, which usually gets me there about 30 minutes before my shift starts, but, you know, depending on accidents and stuff like that, you never know. But I always like to bring a book with me so I can read in my car for 30 minutes before my shift starts, and then I always read on my lunch break, because I don't like to eat too much on my lunch break. I get really sleepy if I eat too much, so I always bring a book with me. I like that book to either be like a small book or like a mass market paperback. So like I was bringing the City of Ember books with me because these are like relatively small, easy to fit in a backpack. The Well of Ascension I do not want to bring with me to work because this is a kind of a chunky book, nice and big. You can see the size difference there. So I picked out Salem's Lot because I was like, I'm just going to start chipping away at this on my lunch breaks and stuff. I'm trying to read Stephen King in chronological order and that he wrote his novels. So I read Carrie 2 months ago. Next up was Salem's Lot. And I ended up falling in love with the book and just shooting through it while I was simultaneously reading The Well of Ascension, but ended up finishing Salem's Lot just a couple days ago. And I'm going to continue to be chipping away at The Well of Ascension throughout the month of July, because it is a great book. I am absolutely loving it. It is a much slower paced book than the original Mistborn book. The original Mistborn book I couldn't put down. I was like boom, boom, boom. It was just nonstop, introducing the magic system, introducing characters, all the drama. Well of Ascension is much more much more character driven, getting a lot of backstory on all of the characters we've come to love. But it's really taking place in one location, and I'm about 400 pages in, and we're kind of still in that same location. So it's just I'm not cruising through it as fast as I did with the first one, even though I'm still liking it just as much. I'm absolutely adoring the book. So now comes the point where I like to rank the videos. I rank the books that I read in the previous month. So this is going to be my ranking for all those books that I read in June. As I like to say with these rankings, these are fully my opinion based on my preference of what I like to read. I always admit there are going to be some books that are lower on this list that are objectively probably better books than the ones that are higher on this list, but this is just my order of what I liked about them in the order that, you know what I'm trying to say. I can't speak right now. My tongue's getting all twisted. But, alright, so from least favorite to favorite, least favorite book that I read in the month of June is The Prophet of Yonwood. This one right here. This is the prequel in the City of Ember. Boy, did this book kind of suck, to be honest with you. I don't like to say that a lot. I usually think I'm a very, I'm overly optimistic when it comes to my rankings. I give a lot of 5-star rankings to books that probably most people would put at like 4 stars. But I just get really excited. I'm like, 5 stars, amazing. This is the first book I've ever given a 2-star review to on Goodreads since I started my reading journey last year. This book is not only not a good book in the City of Ember entire series, it's just not a good book by itself. There are so many weird plot points in this that go absolutely nowhere. Specifically, there's a plot point about a terrorist in the woods that just has a resolution, but a weird resolution that made no sense at all. And then as far as its tie-in to the overall series, it's a page or two at the very end that is barely consequential at all. So the book is interesting enough. I read it in one day. That's why I probably didn't give it a 1-star review, is it only took me a few hours to get through it because it is a middle grade young adult novel. But, it has a few interesting things to say about, religion and, kind of being, brainwashed into thinking a type of way. But overall, it is just not very good. I wouldn't, honestly, if you're reading the City of Ember franchise, I would recommend you skip this one and just pretend like it doesn't exist, because I just thought it was weird and unnecessary. And like I said, I'm usually pretty easygoing with books, but I did not care for it at all. So next up is going to be The Diamond of Darkhold. So this one, this is as meh about a book as I think I've felt in a very long time. It's not terrible, but it's really not that good either. It feels like the author didn't know what to do for the final book in the City of Ember and just kind of wrote this as here's a little side adventure that they go on, because it really does almost feel in a way like a side adventure that was thought up later on. I don't know how much pre-planning she did, but it didn't feel like this was really part of the plan from the beginning, if that makes sense. The beginning is pretty good and the end is pretty good, and then everything in the middle just feels like some kind of thriller that leads to an ending that was pretty satisfactory. When it maps out the characters and what they do for the rest of their lives past the end of the series, it was fine and fun enough. But just overall, it was the weakest of the 3 main books in the City of Ember franchise, and I already am kind of forgetting what happened in it, because I was just it was fine. It was okay. Just compared to the other 2, I thought it was a big letdown. So, moving on, we have The War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells right here. So, I've talked ad nauseum about this in previous videos, so I won't rant on about it again, but basic thoughts are, historically, really great book, the birth of sci-fi. I'm sure this is very influential and very important in the world of literature. It is kind of a boring sci-fi read compared to modern day books. Even though it's a small little book, I found it dragging on quite a bit. I think the second part is much stronger than the first part, but overall, I didn't love it. If you're a fan of historical literature and wanting to go back and read the classics, absolutely go back and read this book, because I'm sure it's worth it. But for me, compared to sci-fi books that I've read more recently, I just found it to be a little bit too dull to really get me there. You know what I'm talking about? So that was The War of the Worlds. Next up, we have Tales of Light and Life, short story collection from Star Wars The High Republic. I am currently reading The High Republic in chronological order. Started with Phase 2, reading Phase 1. This was like pretty much the end of Phase 1, but there are short stories in here about Phase 2 characters, Phase 1 characters, and some stories that go into Phase 3 as well. And overall, I would say this was a very solid book of short story collections. Most of them are like pretty decent, and then there's two that I thought were really excellent. So if you're a fan of Star Wars and you want to be like a completionist when it comes to the High Republic, don't skip this, because I do think there's some good stories in here worth reading. Although not all of them are like amazing, you know. But I feel like that's pretty standard for a lot of short story collections. You have like the really, really good ones, and then you have a few in there that are like, okay, that was good. All right, next up, we have The People of Sparks, the second book in the City of Ember franchise. Honestly, when it comes to these two books, The People of Sparks and The City of Ember, they're so close side by side. Like, I put The City of Ember above The People of Sparks just because it has that extra nostalgia factor for me. I read The City of Ember in like middle school, and I just had so many fond memories of it. I think the reason I'll put The People of Sparks a little lower is it just doesn't have that appeal of the awesome setup that City of Ember did, of like the people underground, like their city is dying. Like that to me was just a very enticing like setup that really hooked me into the story. You know, in this, by the time this book comes around, they're already past that. But I did like what this book had to say a lot about two groups of people, very different opinions and ways of lifestyle, trying to get along in a society, and the the head bashing that comes along with that. So I thought it was very cool and had some great moral lessons for a younger reading audience. And then I've already mentioned The City of Ember, but this one definitely comes next. And once again, a lot of great themes for kids. A very, very solid middle grade young adult novel that I think everybody, young and adult, can gain a lot from reading this. And like I said, that setup, just so cool. Just the underground city, the city's dying, running short on resources. They got to figure out what to do. A really cool hook for a really fun book. All right, then that comes to another book I've talked a lot about in previous videos, but A Court of Wings and Ruin. All I'll say again is I was sleeping on this franchise. I read the first book. I thought it was meh at best. The second and third book totally flipped that around for me. I thought this was the strongest of the three, and there's so much world building and character development in this that it won me over. I was not expecting to love these books, but I can't lie and say that I didn't. The only gripe I kind of have with this book is I thought the ending did a lot of fake out death type situations. I'm not going to spoil anything beyond that. I wish it had. I wish Sarah J. Maas had stuck to her guns a little bit more and committed. But that's all I'll say. I like I said, don't want to spoil it. But overall, the ending was good. It was just that aspect of it felt very. You know how they say like the Marvel Cinematic Universe like kind of fakes out a lot of character deaths. I was like, kind of doing the same thing. And then the last book, my favorite book of the month of June, Salem's Lot. Once again, the glare is just awful on this book right now. This is such an awesome book. And like I said, I picked it up on the side to just kind of like, have something to read at work, and I ended up putting down my main book, which is The Well of Ascension, to just knock through this one as quick as possible. This is classic vampires, classic Stephen King. He does such an amazing job of setting up this little town and really putting you in their world, and there's so many different characters, but he really fleshes all of them out, and like I said, you feel like you're in the town of Salem's Lot. And something I thought really interesting about this book, there really truly isn't mention of vampires until like 250 to 300 pages in. A lot of the beginning is just setup and character work and development of like the townsfolk, but I was still locked in. Just it's something about Stephen King, something about the way he writes. It hooks me. I should have known better to think I could just like passively read this one. But then by the time the the vampires do start kicking in, and stuff starts really popping off. It's horrifying. It's terrifying. There are so many great scenes in this book, and I loved it a lot. Definitely really high up on my Stephen King rankings. I've only read, I believe this was the 9th book by Stephen King that I've read, so I'm very much still a novice, but this absolutely skyrocketed to towards the top for me. Salem's Lot, awesome. Very excited to read more Stephen King. So, okay, so that was my June TBR. That was my ranking. Now I'm going to talk about the books that I plan on reading in July. And good news is, one of them I already finished. So I'm recording this video on July 3rd. Yesterday, July 2nd, I read Holes. I saw this on my fiance's shelf. This was, I decided would be my nostalgia read for the month of July. If you haven't seen my other videos, I always pick a nostalgia read, a book from my childhood that I read and I loved, and I want to go back and revisit it as an adult, because I took like a big 10-year gap in my reading career. Didn't read for a very long time and just started up again last year in 2024. So I wanted to read Holes as my nostalgia read. Started reading it yesterday. I didn't put it down. This book was absolutely incredible. So much fun. We probably watch the movie like once a month. It's me and my fiance's one of our favorite movies of all time, and it is so close to the movie. Like, I know the book came first, but like just reading some of the lines that they translated over into the movie and having them in like the written context was just so much fun to see, like how they did that adaptation. It's such a wonderful story. I will say this is one of the few times where I do think the movie is better than the book. Not by a whole lot, but the ending of the movie I think felt more fleshed out, and there was a lot more wrap up that I felt was satisfying in the movie, whereas in the book, it actually wraps up very, very quickly. I was surprised how much they added for the movie, and it didn't feel as satisfying. So I like the movie a little bit better, but still a great, great book for all ages. Kids, young adults, adults, definitely read Holes if you hadn't, especially if you love the movie, because it's a really, really great time. So now we're going to get into the books that I haven't read. Next up, I have Escape from Valo, which is a middle grade novel in the Star Wars High Republic series. This is the start of Phase 3. As you can see, I have a bookmark in there. I actually started kind of chipping away at it this morning. But excited for this. I don't love the middle grade novels as much, but I do want to read everything in the High Republic, and this is the next in line, so definitely going to finish that. We have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This has been on my shelf for a long time, and I finally decided to pick it up and read it because the movie trailer came out a couple days ago, and I was like, well, I need to finish the book before I watch the movie. So very excited for this. Heard a lot of awesome things about this book. Super stoked to pick this one up and read it. I have 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill, which I believe is his short story collection. I probably should have looked at that before I started, but at this point it's too late. My fiance loves Joe Hill, has all of his books. I've only read Nosferatu, and I wanted to take just a little break from Stephen King because I just burned through Salem's Lot. So I was like, I'm going to read 20th Century Ghosts. Very excited for this and excited to read more of Joe Hill's stuff. I want to knock all of his books out eventually. I have A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is book number 4 in the ACOTAR franchise, coming hot off of Wings and Ruin, which I loved. I was like, let me keep it going. Let me read the next one. This is by far the shortest novel. I've also heard from people that is not the best, so I'm interested to see how it compares, especially since I've loved the last two so much. I've heard this is very much a filler type novel, but I'm going to read it, and since it's so short, if I don't love it, at least I can knock it out pretty quick. And then lastly, my friend let me borrow this. This is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, the prequel to The Lord of the Rings, a franchise that I absolutely adore, and I've never read The Silmarillion before, so super excited to get into it. I've heard this book is dense, so I'm going to save it towards the end because I think I'm going to be able to burn through the rest of it pretty quickly. I want to take my time with this one to really enjoy it and absorb all of the information. And there's just this massive section in the back that is all like vocab and history footnotes and all that stuff. So definitely going to work my way through this. But I love The Lord of the Rings. Want to reread them soon. And figured what better way to do before I do that than to read The Silmarillion right before it. So I feel good. I think for my July TBR, I'm going to be able to knock it out pretty quickly. I think I might have some room towards the end of the month to add more books, but I want to keep my expectations nice and level. I don't want to do what I've done before and be like, I'm going to read all of this, and then I end up getting only through like half of it. So that's what I'm going to commit to for July. If I finish it all, I'm excited. I have a couple more books that I might try to squeeze in there, but I will keep you all updated in my next bi-weekly video. I also have a plan to make a video to rank all of the books I've read in the first 6 months of 2025 from least favorite to favorite. So working on making that list, it's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but I'm going to try to do it and get that video out soon. So thank you so much for watching, y'all. Appreciate it. My name is Christian again, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.